The air in courtroom 4B was a thick, suffocating blanket woven from threads of anxiety, stale coffee, and institutional disinfectant. It was a sterile, beige room designed to witness the methodical dismantling of human connection. And on this Tuesday morning, it was the stage for the final act of Alex's marriage. He sat at the respondent's table, his back ramrod straight, his hands resting calmly on the polished wood. Across the aisle, his soon-to-be ex-wife, Isabella, radiated an aura of triumphant confidence. She whispered to her lawyer, a sleek, silver-haired man named Arthur Vance, and a small, cruel smile played on her lips. She looked, Alex thought with a strange detachment, like a predator who had already tasted victory. Her new partner, Marcus Thorne, sat in the front row of the gallery, a monument to tailored suits and inherited wealth. He caught Alex's eye and gave a slow, condescending nod, a gesture that said, "This is how the world works. The strong win, you lose." Beside him sat Isabella's parents, the Hendersons, their faces masks of patrician disappointment, their judgment of Alex a palpable force in the room. They had always seen him as a temporary inconvenience, a curious foray into the middle class for their daughter, and now they were here to watch the final, satisfying correction. Vance had just concluded a 40-minute monologue, a masterclass in character assassination disguised as legal argument. He painted Alex as an unambitious, unstable, and financially inept man, a ghost in his own family, incapable of providing the necessary environment for his 5-year-old daughter, Lily. He used words like lethargic, unmotivated, and emotionally detached. Alex listened to the litany of his supposed failures without flinching, his expression unchanging. He felt the weight of the judge's gaze, a woman in her late 50s with tired eyes that had seen every flavor of human betrayal. Her name was Judge Eleanor Morrison, and her reputation was one of sharp intellect and little patience for theatrics. "And so, Your Honor," Vance concluded, his voice resonating with false sincerity, "it is with a heavy heart that my client, Miss Isabella Thorne, soon-to-be, insists upon full and sole custody. It is, quite simply, what is best for the child." A heavy silence fell. Judge Morrison looked from Vance to Alex's lawyer, a quiet, unassuming woman named Sarah Davies. "Miss Davies," the judge said, her tone flat, "your response?" Sarah Davies rose. She was the opposite of Vance in every way. Her suit was practical, her hair was tied back without flourish, and her demeanor was one of calm efficiency. To Isabella and her family, she looked like a public defender, another symbol of Alex's inadequacy. They didn't know that Sarah Davies had a reputation in certain circles as a shark who preferred to swim in quiet waters. "Your Honor," Sarah began, her voice clear and steady, "Mr. Vance has painted a compelling picture, a work of fiction, but compelling nonetheless." Vance bristled, but Sarah continued without pause. "We could spend the next several hours dismantling this narrative piece by piece. We could present financial records that show my client, Mr. Sterling, is not only stable, but is in fact the silent partner in a highly successful architectural firm. We could introduce testimony from teachers and caregivers about his unwavering dedication to his daughter Lily. We could talk about the dozens of times he has canceled important meetings or flown home from business trips at a moment's notice because Lily had a fever or simply missed her daddy." She paused, letting the words hang in the air. Isabella shifted in her seat, a flicker of annoyance crossing her face. "This wasn't part of the script." "We could do all of that, Your Honor," Sarah said, her voice dropping slightly. "But I believe we can save the court a significant amount of time. My client has one piece of evidence he would like to present. It's a voicemail, just 34 seconds long." She looked at Alex. He gave a single, almost imperceptible nod. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small, simple audio player, the kind used for dictation. It looked ancient and insignificant in the grand, intimidating courtroom. He placed it on the table, the symbolic object, the small key that would unlock the truth. The judge looked skeptical. A voicemail? Yes, Your Honor, Sarah confirmed. A voicemail left by Miss Henderson for my client 3 weeks ago. We believe it speaks more directly to the matter of parental fitness than anything Mr. Vance has said today. Vance shot to his feet. Objection! Ambush tactics! We haven't had this evidence submitted for discovery. It was submitted this morning, counsel, Sarah replied coolly, holding up a time-stamped receipt from the clerk's office. You were perhaps too busy preparing your soliloquy to check your inbox. Judge Morrison's lips thinned. Overruled. I'll allow it. Proceed, Mr. Sterling. Alex picked up the small device. His hand was steady. He could feel every eye in the room on him. Isabella's smug curiosity, Marcus's bored contempt, his former in-law's pity. He saw it all, but the only thing he focused on was the small, red button. He thought of Lily, of her laughter that sounded like wind chimes, of the way she tucked her small hand into his. This was for her. Everything was for her. He pressed the button. Before we hear what was on that voicemail, I just want to take a moment to welcome you. If you're enjoying this story, please consider hitting that like button and subscribing to the channel for more content just like this. It really helps us grow, and I'd love to know where you're watching from today. Drop your city or country in the comments below. It's always amazing to see how far these stories travel. Now, let's get back to that courtroom, because everything is about to change. The static hissed for a fraction of a second before Isabella's voice filled the silent courtroom. It was not the composed, elegant voice she used in public. This was her true voice, raw and sharp and laced with venom. Alex, pick up. I know you're there, screening your calls like a coward. Listen to me very carefully. Lily is staying with me tonight, and tomorrow, and every night after that if I feel like it. You think you can fight me on this? You think some judge is going to side with a sad little architect who designed strip malls over me? Over Marcus Thorne? We will bury you. I will stand in that courtroom and I will lie. I will say you drink. I will say you have a temper. I will say whatever I have to say to make sure you are nothing more than a weekend visitor in your own daughter's life. She is a Henderson, a future Thorne. She is not a Sterling. She is an accessory to my new life, and you are a loose end I am about to tie off. Don't you dare call me back. Just wait for the papers from my lawyer. You're finished. The click of the disconnected call echoed in the profound silence that followed. 34 seconds. 34 seconds that had just detonated the foundations of Isabella's carefully constructed world. The flashback began not with a bang, but with the clinking of wine glasses. It was 6 months earlier, at the Hendersons' sprawling estate, a house that always seemed to disapprove of Alex's very presence. The occasion was his and Isabella's 8th wedding anniversary, though it felt more like a parole hearing. He had just presented Isabella with his gift, a first-edition copy of her favorite childhood book, which he had spent months tracking down through rare book dealers. She had smiled, a polite, thin smile that didn't reach her eyes, and placed it on a side table without a second glance. That's thoughtful, Alex, she'd said, the word thoughtful landing with the weight of quaint or cheap. Her father, Richard Henderson, a man whose posture seemed permanently stiffened by the starch in his collars and his bank account, raised his glass. To 8 years, he announced, his eyes fixed on Alex. A testament, I suppose, to Isabella's patience. The comment was met with polite, knowing chuckles from Isabella's mother, Eleanor, and her brother, William. They were a clan, a closed circle of self-satisfaction, and Alex had always been on the outside, a curiosity they tolerated for Isabella's sake. He had met her in college, before the full weight of her family's expectations had settled on her. She had been vibrant, funny, and seemed to find his quiet ambition and artistic soul a refreshing change from the trust fund heirs she grew up with. But over the years, the gravity of her upbringing had pulled her back into its orbit. His steady, methodical success as an architect, building a small but respected firm from the ground up, was a source of embarrassment to her, not pride. It wasn't fast enough, not flashy enough. It didn't come with a family name that opened doors with a whisper. Later that evening, after the guests had departed, the true celebration began. It was an intervention, orchestrated by Isabella and her parents. They sat him down in the formal living room, a space so perfectly decorated it felt like a museum exhibit. "Alex," Isabella began, her tone the one a person uses to fire a long-serving but incompetent employee. "We need to talk about the future, about my future, about Lily's future." "Our future," he corrected gently. "No," she said, the words sharp and final. "Mine. I've been reevaluating things. I look at my life, at our life, and it's not what I envisioned. It's not what I deserve." Her father leaned forward, his hands steepled. "Son, let's be frank. You're a good man, a decent man, but decency doesn't pay for a chalet in Aspen. It doesn't secure a legacy. Isabella has opportunities, opportunities you are frankly holding her back from." Alex felt a cold knot tighten in his stomach. He looked at his wife, the woman he had built a life with, the mother of his child, and saw a stranger. Her eyes were hard, calculating. "What opportunities are we talking about?" "I've reconnected with Marcus Thorne," she said, naming the son of a rival real estate magnate, a man she had dated briefly before Alex. Marcus was everything Alex was not: loud, ostentatious, and born on third base, convinced he'd hit a triple. "He understands what it means to build an empire," Richard Henderson added. "He sees Isabella for the asset she is, not just a wife, but a partner in building a brand." The sheer, naked transactionalism of it all left Alex speechless. They were talking about his wife, his family, as if it were a corporate merger. He felt a surge of anger, hot and sharp, but he pushed it down. He had learned long ago that showing emotion in this family was a sign of weakness. Dignity was his only shield. "And what about Lily?" Alex asked, his voice quiet but firm. "Is she part of this brand you're building?" Isabella waved a dismissive hand. "Lily will have the best of everything. The best schools, the best tutors, the best connections. Things you can't give her, Alex. Things you don't even understand the value of." "I understand the value of a father," he said, the words heavy with a pain they couldn't comprehend. "I understand the value of bedtime stories and scraped knees and teaching her how to ride a bike without training wheels. Do you?" His question hung in the air, an unwelcome truth in a room built on convenient lies. Eleanor Henderson, who had been silent until now, finally spoke, her voice smooth as silk but laced with steel. "Don't be sentimental, Alex. It's unbecoming. What Isabella is doing is for the good of the family, and you, unfortunately, are no longer a part of that equation. We expect you to be reasonable about this. A quiet divorce, no fuss. For Lily's sake, of course. For Lily's sake." They had weaponized his love for his daughter, turning it into a leash to ensure his compliance. He stood up, the silence in the room stretching thin. He looked at each of them, Richard with his cold, appraising stare, Eleanor with her venomous politeness, and Isabella, his wife, whose face was a mask of resolute ambition. "I see," he said, and in that moment, he did. He saw the entire chessboard. He saw the moves they had planned and the checkmate they envisioned. They saw a quiet, unassuming man they could easily push aside. They saw a pawn. They had no idea they were talking to a king. "Thank you for your honesty," he added, the calmness of his voice unnerving them far more than any outburst would have. He turned and walked out of the room, out of the house, and out of the life they had decided was no longer his. The first battle was lost, but he knew, with a certainty that settled deep in his bones, the war was just beginning, and he would not lose his daughter. The meeting with the lawyers was the second stage of his humiliation. Isabella had insisted they meet at the offices of Vance and Associates, a firm whose lobby was a symphony of marble, dark wood, and hushed intimidation. Marcus Thorne was there, an unofficial but looming presence at Isabella's side. He sat with one ankle resting on his knee, radiating an air of ownership, as if he were presiding over the dissolution of a minor subsidiary. Alex arrived with Sarah Davies, whom he had found through a discreet referral. Her office was in a modest building downtown, clean and functional, a place for work, not for show. The contrast was not lost on anyone in the room. Vance looked at Sarah's sensible briefcase and then at his own monogrammed leather portfolio with a small, superior smile. "Mr. Sterling," Vance began, foregoing any pleasantries, "we've drawn up a preliminary proposal for the dissolution of the marriage. My client is prepared to be generous." He slid a thick document across the vast mahogany table. Alex didn't look at it. He kept his eyes on Isabella. She refused to meet his gaze, instead focusing on a point somewhere over his left shoulder. "Generous," Sarah repeated, her tone neutral. She picked up the document and began to scan the first page. "I see. A one-time payment that is roughly equivalent to 10% of the value of the marital home. A home Mr. Sterling's inheritance paid the down payment on. Forfeiture of all claims to shared assets and investments. And a child support arrangement based on a fabricated, artificially low assessment of my client's income." She looked up, her eyes sharp. "Your definition of generous is certainly creative, Mr. Vance." Marcus chuckled, a low, rumbling sound. "It's more than he deserves. He's been a passenger in Isabella's life for years. This is his severance package." Alex's jaw tightened, but his voice remained level. "Lily is not a line item in a severance package, Marcus." "Lily will be well taken care of," Isabella said, finally looking at him. Her eyes were cold. "She'll be in an environment conducive to success. She won't be held back by mediocrity." The insult was clear, designed to sting, to provoke a reaction he could later be painted as unstable for. But Alex had spent years navigating the subtle cruelties of the Henderson family. He was inoculated against their brand of poison. "My mediocrity," Alex said, his voice calm, "is what got you through your master's degree when you wanted to quit. It's what built the deck you love to host parties on. It's what sat up all night with our daughter when she had colic while you got your rest." He listed the grievances, not with anger, but with the dispassionate air of an accountant reading a ledger. Each one was a small, undeniable truth, and their cumulative weight made Isabella flinch. Vance, sensing he was losing control of the narrative, intervened. "That's all very touching, but it's irrelevant. We are here to discuss the division of assets and the custody of the child. On that front, we are not prepared to negotiate. Ms. Henderson will have sole custody. You will have visitation every other weekend. That is our first and final offer." Sarah Davies closed the proposal with a soft snap. "Then this meeting is over," she said simply. "My client will not be abandoning his daughter." As they stood to leave, Marcus made his move. He rose, blocking Alex's path. He was taller than Alex, broader, and he used his physical presence as another tool of intimidation. "You should take the deal, pal," Marcus said, his voice a low threat. "You have no idea what you're up against. We have the resources to drag this out for years. We can bury you in legal fees. We can paint you as anything we want you to be. By the time we're done, you'll be lucky to see your kid on Christmas. Walk away with what's on the table. It's the smart play." Alex looked at the man who was trying to replace him, at the smug certainty on his face. He saw the hollow core beneath the expensive suit. This was a man who had never fought for anything in his life because everything had been given to him. He didn't understand the strength of a person with nothing left to lose. "The only play I'm interested in," Alex said, his voice so quiet it forced Marcus to lean in slightly, "is the one that ends with me tucking my daughter into bed at night. Now, if you'll excuse us." He stepped around Marcus without a backward glance, leaving the man standing there, momentarily stunned by a response that wasn't fear or anger, but simple, unshakable resolve. As he and Sarah walked down the marbled hall, she glanced at him. "They're going to play dirty," she said. "I know," Alex replied. He touched his jacket pocket, where the small USB drive now resided. It felt cool and solid against his fingertips. "That's why we have to play smart." He had started his preparation the day after the intervention. While Isabella was moving her things out, making a show of her liberation, Alex was making copies. He scanned years of bank statements, credit card bills, and investment reports. He documented the lavish spending, the business trips that were thinly veiled vacations with friends, the complete financial disconnect between Isabella's lifestyle and her actual income, which was a modest salary from a part-time position at her mother's art gallery, a job that was more of a hobby than a career. He wasn't looking for dirt, he was looking for the truth. The narrative they were building was that he was a financial drain, an anchor on her ambition. The reality, which the numbers clearly showed, was that his steady, growing income from his architectural firm had subsidized her entire life. His firm wasn't a global powerhouse, but it was successful, respected, and profitable, a truth he had deliberately downplayed for years to avoid bruising the Henderson family ego. He had preferred to be underestimated. Now that preference was becoming a strategy. He deposited every document, every email, every piece of evidence onto the small, encrypted USB drive. It was his secret ledger, his quiet rebuttal to their loud, empty threats. He was building his case the same way he designed his buildings, with a solid foundation, meticulous attention to detail, and a structure designed to withstand any storm. The third humiliation was the ugliest, because it happened in front of Lily. It was a Saturday afternoon, bright and sunny. Alex had taken Lily to the park, their weekend ritual. They were by the duck pond, Lily laughing with delight as she threw pieces of bread into the water, when Isabella and Marcus appeared. They hadn't come in Isabella's sensible SUV, but in Marcus's car, a low-slung Italian sports car that roared into the parking lot like an invading army. Isabella marched towards them, her face a thundercloud. Marcus followed a few paces behind, looking bored and out of place in his designer loafers. "What is she doing here?" Isabella demanded, not looking at her daughter, but at Alex. "I told you she was supposed to be with me today. I have a brunch." Alex remained calm, for Lily's sake. "We agreed on Saturday afternoons, Isabella. It's in the temporary agreement our lawyers drafted. You have her this evening." "The agreement is what I say it is," she snapped. "Plans have changed. Lily, come on, we're leaving." Lily, sensing the tension, shrank behind Alex's legs. "I want to stay with Daddy," she whispered, her small voice trembling. "We're feeding the ducks." The sight of her daughter clinging to Alex seemed to enrage Isabella. It was a rejection she couldn't tolerate. "Don't be ridiculous, Lily. You're coming with me. Marcus bought you a new dress." She held up a bag from a boutique so expensive it was practically a parody of itself. Alex put a protective hand on Lily's shoulder. "Isabella, we're not doing this here. You're upsetting her." "You're upsetting her by being difficult," she shot back, her voice rising. People in the park were starting to look. "You're poisoning her against me." Marcus stepped forward, placing a hand on Isabella's arm. "Izzy, calm down. Let's not make a scene." But his tone was placating, not corrective. He was managing her, not defending Alex or Lily. "He's doing it on purpose," Isabella insisted, pulling her arm away. She turned her fury back on Alex. "You enjoy this, don't you? Playing the martyr, the sainted father. You have nothing, Alex. Nothing to offer her. I'm her mother, and I'm taking her." She reached for Lily's arm. Alex instinctively moved between them, shielding his daughter. "No," he said, his voice low and dangerous. "You're not." For a moment they were at a standoff. The happy sounds of the park, children laughing, dogs barking, seemed to fade into a dull roar. Lily started to cry, soft, frightened sobs. The sound of his daughter's tears broke through Alex's control. But his anger wasn't hot, it was ice cold. It was a clarifying force. He knew he had to end this, not just for today, but for good. Isabella, seeing she had lost, finally played her last card. She sneered, her face ugly with contempt. Fine, keep her. Let her play in the dirt with her failure of a father. But don't think this changes anything. You will lose. I will make sure of it. She turned on her heel and stormed back towards the ridiculous car, Marcus trailing in her wake like a pilot fish. Alex knelt and pulled his sobbing daughter into his arms, murmuring comforting words, his heart breaking for her. He held her for a long time, until her tears subsided and she was just a small, warm weight against his chest. As he buckled her into her car seat a few minutes later, his phone buzzed. It was a new voicemail. He knew who it was from. His hand trembled slightly as he listened to it in the quiet of his car, the engine off, the sounds of the park now distant and muffled. He heard the rage, the entitlement, the threats. He heard the utter contempt she had for him, and worse, the way she spoke of their daughter as an object, an accessory. He saved the message. Then he saved it again to a secure cloud server, and then he transferred it to the small, unassuming USB drive. He now had the foundation, the frame, and the finishing touch. His case was built. It was solid, it was irrefutable, and it was devastating. Now, back in the sterile, beige courtroom, the 34 seconds of that message had finished playing. The silence it left behind was heavier, more profound than any that had come before. It was a vacuum, sucking all the air and arrogance out of Isabella's side of the room. The color had drained from Isabella's face. She stared at the small audio player on Alex's table as if it were a venomous snake. Her mouth opened and closed, but no sound came out. She looked at her lawyer, Arthur Vance, for help. But for the first time all day, the slick, confident attorney was utterly lost. His carefully constructed narrative had been demolished by a weapon he never saw coming. The truth, in his own client's voice. Marcus Thorne in the gallery looked disgusted, not with Isabella's words, but with her carelessness. He wasn't a man who valued morality. He valued strength and control. She had shown weakness, a lack of discipline, and he was already disassociating himself from her failure. He subtly shifted in his seat, creating a few more inches of physical space between himself and her parents. An act of social distancing that was as clear as a public declaration. Richard and Eleanor Henderson looked as if they had been struck. Their faces, usually composed masks of detached superiority, were now slack with shock. They had heard their daughter's voice, the one they knew she possessed, but which was never to be displayed in public. They had heard the ugly, raw ambition they had so carefully nurtured, now laid bare for a court of law to see. But the only person who mattered was Judge Eleanor Morrison. Her face was granite. The weariness in her eyes had been replaced by a cold, hard anger. She looked at Isabella, a long, silent appraisal that was more damning than any verbal condemnation. She had seen countless parents fight over their children, using them as pawns and weapons. But to hear it so explicitly stated, to hear a child referred to as an accessory, was something that had clearly breached even her hardened cynicism. She turned her gaze to Alex. She saw the quiet dignity he had maintained, the lack of gloating, the profound sadness in his eyes. He had not wanted this public evisceration. He had simply wanted to protect his child. Judge Morrison cleared her throat. The small sound was like a thunderclap in the silent room. "Mr. Vance," she said, her voice dangerously quiet, "do you have anything to say in response to this evidence?" Vance scrambled to his feet, his composure shattered. "Your Honor, this is out of context. A moment of anger, a heated disagreement between spouses." "A heated disagreement?" the judge interrupted, her voice cutting through his stammering. "Counsel, I heard a detailed, premeditated plan to commit perjury. I heard a mother describe her own child as a prop for her new life. I heard a threat to use the legal system to systematically and maliciously remove a loving father from his daughter's life. Do not insult my intelligence by calling that a disagreement. She swiveled her chair to face Isabella directly. Ms. Henderson, is that your voice on the recording? Isabella could only nod, a jerky, panicked motion. And did you mean what you said? Isabella's eyes darted around the room, looking for an escape that wasn't there. I was upset, she whispered, her voice a hoarse croak. That's not what I asked, the judge pressed, her voice like ice. Did you mean it? Isabella broke. A sob escaped her lips. Yes, she admitted, the word barely audible. It was over. Everyone in the room knew it. The legal arguments, the character assassinations, the posturing, it had all been rendered meaningless. In 34 seconds, the truth had done what hours of testimony could not. Judge Morrison looked down at the file in front of her, then back up. I have heard enough, she declared. I am ready to make a ruling on the matter of temporary custody pending the final divorce decree. Vance sank back into his chair, defeated. Sarah Davies sat perfectly still, her hands folded on the table. Alex looked straight ahead, his heart pounding a slow, heavy rhythm in his chest. He felt no triumph, only a deep, aching sorrow for his daughter, who was at the center of this wreckage. The court's primary and indeed only concern in matters of custody is the best interest of the child, Judge Morrison began, her voice formal and powerful, filling every corner of the room. It is this court's opinion that an environment of stability, love, and unwavering emotional support is paramount to a child's well-being. She paused, her eyes locking onto Isabella. An environment where a child is considered an accessory is not such an environment. An environment where a parent is willing to lie under oath and manipulate the legal system for personal gain is not such an environment. It is, in fact, an environment of profound toxicity and moral corruption. Each word was a hammer blow, dismantling the last vestiges of Isabella's composure. Conversely, the judge continued, turning her gaze to Alex, the court has seen a father who has endured insults and threats with quiet dignity. A father whose primary concern, demonstrated by his conduct here today, is the shielding of his child from conflict, not the winning of a legal battle. He did not present an avalanche of evidence to humiliate his ex-partner. He presented a single, irrefutable piece of evidence to protect his daughter. She looked from Alex to Sarah Davies, and then back again. The request for sole custody by the petitioner, Ms. Henderson, is denied. Vehemently. She picked up her gavel. Effective immediately, I am granting temporary sole legal and physical custody of the minor child, Lily Sterling, to the respondent, Mr. Alex Sterling. The gavel came down with a sharp, final crack. The petitioner, Miss Henderson, will have supervised visitation, twice a month, at a facility to be determined by the court. This arrangement will be in place until such time as she has completed a comprehensive psychological evaluation and a court-mandated parenting course. We are adjourned. The entire proceeding, from the moment Alex pressed play to the final bang of the gavel, had taken less than 6 minutes. The aftermath in the courtroom was a tableau of chaos and silence. As Judge Morrison swept out of the room, Isabella let out a strangled cry, a sound of pure, unadulterated disbelief. She turned to her lawyer, her face contorted. "Do something!" she shrieked, her voice echoing in the now cavernous room. "This isn't possible. Appeal this. Do your job." Vance, pale and shaken, could only shake his head. "Isabella, there's nothing to appeal. It was your own voice. The judge has wide discretion in custody matters. She made her ruling." "My father will ruin you," she hissed, her desperation curdling into rage. "Your father can't unsay what you said," Vance replied, already packing his briefcase, eager to distance himself from the toxic fallout. Alex stood up slowly. He and Sarah exchanged a brief, meaningful look. There was no celebration, only a shared sense of grim necessity. As he turned to leave, he saw Marcus Thorne already halfway to the door, his phone pressed to his ear. He didn't look back at Isabella. He didn't offer a word of comfort or support. The merger was off. The asset had become a liability. He was cutting his losses. The speed of his desertion was breathtaking in its brutality. Then Alex's gaze fell on the Hendersons. Richard and Eleanor were frozen in their seats, their faces ashen. For the first time, they looked their age. They looked small. The armor of their wealth and status had been stripped away, and all that was left were two arrogant people who had just witnessed the public implosion of their daughter. An implosion they had helped engineer. Eleanor met Alex's eyes for a fleeting second. He saw no remorse, no apology. He saw only a flicker of pure, unadulterated hatred for the man who had dared to expose them. Alex walked out of the courtroom and into the wide, echoing hallway. He felt as though he had been holding his breath for 6 months and had only just exhaled. The tension drained out of him, leaving him feeling hollowed out and weary. Sarah Davies caught up with him by the elevators. "Are you all right?" she asked, her professional demeanor softening with genuine concern. "I will be," he said. "I just want to go pick up my daughter." "The judge's order is being filed as we speak. It's effective immediately," she assured him. "They can't stop you. Alex, you did the right thing. It was harsh, but it was necessary. You protected her." "I know," he said, though the victory felt heavy. He had won, but in doing so, he had been forced to reveal a truth about Lily's mother that Lily herself would one day have to understand. That was a burden he would have to help her carry. "Thank you, Sarah, for everything, for believing me." "I didn't just believe you," she said, offering a small, rare smile. "I saw the blueprints. You had a solid plan from the beginning." The elevator doors opened, and he stepped inside. As they descended, he thought about the words Sarah had used. Blueprints. It was true. He had approached this crisis the only way he knew how. He had studied the terrain, understood the stresses and loads, and designed a structure that would not fail, a structure to protect his little girl. The days that followed were a blur of logistics in quiet adjustment. Alex picked Lily up from her preschool that afternoon. She ran into his arms, blissfully unaware of the tectonic shift that had just occurred in her life. "Daddy," she squealed, "did you have a good day at work?" "The best, sweetie," he said, hugging her tightly, burying his face in her hair that smelled of playground dust and apple juice. "The absolute best." He explained to her, in the simple, gentle terms a 5-year-old could understand, that she would be living with him at his house for a while, and that she would see Mommy on some weekends. He braced for tears and questions, but Lily, with the surprising resilience of a child, simply nodded. "Okay, Daddy, can we build a big Lego castle tonight?" For her, as long as she had one loving parent to anchor her, her world was still safe. That, Alex knew, was the only victory that truly mattered. He received a single, vitriolic text message from Isabella that evening, a string of accusations and threats that he read once and then deleted without replying. He blocked her number and the numbers of her parents. The lines of communication would now run exclusively through their lawyers, as they should have from the start. A week later, Sarah called. "You're not going to believe this," she said, a note of astonishment in her voice. "Arthur Vance just called me. Marcus Thorne has officially ended his relationship with Isabella. It's all over town. Apparently, the story of the voicemail is making the rounds in their social circle. She's been completely ostracized." Poetic justice. Isabella had wanted to ascend into a higher social stratum, to use her new relationship as a platform. Instead, her own actions had turned that platform into a trapdoor. She had valued appearances above all else, and now her appearance was permanently tarnished. "And there's more," Sarah continued. "Richard Henderson called me directly, tried to offer a settlement, A very, very large one. He wants you to agree to a joint custody arrangement in exchange for a trust fund for Lily and well, a ridiculous amount of money for you. Alex felt a bitter taste in his mouth. Even now, after everything, they thought they could buy their way out of consequences. They thought his principles, his love for his daughter, had a price tag. Tell him no, Alex said without a moment's hesitation. Tell him my daughter is not for sale. I already did, Sarah said, and he could hear the satisfaction in her voice. I just thought you should know. They don't get it, Alex. They truly don't understand why they lost. That's because they think it was a game, Alex replied, looking out his window at Lily, who was chasing a butterfly in their small backyard. They don't understand that this is about a life. The first supervised visitation was a stilted, awkward affair. It took place in a sterile room at a family services center, with a court-appointed supervisor sitting in the corner, taking notes. Isabella arrived looking wan and exhausted. She had brought an enormous, expensive doll for Lily, a transparently desperate attempt to buy back affection. Lily, however, was hesitant. She stayed close to Alex, holding his hand. She accepted the gift but then put it aside, more interested in showing her mother a drawing she had made. Isabella tried to engage, but her movements were stiff, her smiles forced. She didn't know how to simply be with her daughter without an audience, without a purpose beyond reinforcing her own image as a mother. The 30-minute session felt like an eternity. When it was over, Lily gave her a perfunctory hug and then ran back to Alex. As they walked away, Alex glanced back and saw Isabella standing alone in the middle of the room, looking lost. For the first time, he felt a flicker of something that wasn't anger or sorrow, but a distant, clinical pity. Months turned into a year. The divorce was finalized, the judge's temporary custody order made permanent. Alex's architectural firm, freed from the need to downplay its success, landed 2 major contracts that elevated its profile significantly. He wasn't aiming for the kind of empire the Hendersons respected, but he was building something real and lasting, something of his own. He and Lily settled into a new rhythm. Their life was not extravagant, but it was rich. It was filled with pancake breakfasts and trips to the library, with muddy knees from soccer practice and long, rambling conversations about everything from dinosaurs to the color of the sky. Alex discovered a depth of patience and love within himself he never knew he possessed. He was not just a weekend visitor, he was the constant, the sun around which his daughter's happy little world revolved. He learned through the grapevine that Isabella had moved out of the city. Her parents had sold their large estate and downsized. The Thorne Empire had continued its ascent, with Marcus's picture occasionally appearing in the society pages, always with a new, impeccably pedigreed woman on his arm. They had all moved on, back to their world of surfaces and transactions. One evening, as Alex was tucking Lily into bed, she looked up at him with her serious, thoughtful eyes. "Daddy," she said, "why doesn't Mommy live with us anymore?" He had been preparing for this question for a long time. He sat on the edge of her bed and took her small hand in his. "Sometimes, sweetie," he began, choosing his words carefully, "grown-ups want different things, and sometimes they forget how to be kind to each other. Your mommy and I, we just couldn't live in the same house anymore, but we both love you more than anything in the world." It was a simple explanation, a kind one. It was a lie of omission, but a necessary one for now. The full, complicated truth could wait until she was old enough to understand it. For now, all she needed to know was that she was loved. "You love me the most, though," she stated, a hint of a question in her voice. He smiled, his heart swelling. "I love you to the moon and back, and all the way around the stars," he said, their old familiar ritual. "And I love you to Jupiter and back," she replied, her eyes growing heavy with sleep. He kissed her forehead and turned on her nightlight, a soft, glowing moon that cast gentle shadows on the wall. He stood in the doorway for a moment, watching her drift off to sleep, her breathing soft and even. In the quiet of the house, he reflected on the storm they had weathered. He had been underestimated, dismissed, and insulted. They had tried to break his spirit and take his child. They had mistaken his quietness for weakness, his patience for passivity. But true strength isn't about shouting the loudest or having the most. It's not about the suit you wear or the car you drive. True strength is quiet. It's the resilience to withstand pressure, the integrity to choose the right path, even when it's the hardest, and the unwavering courage to protect what you love. They had thought they could bury him, but they didn't realize he was a seed. In the end, he hadn't just won a court case, he had won a life, a real, authentic, and beautiful life with his daughter. And that was a victory greater than any empire. It's a powerful reminder, isn't it, that what truly defines us isn't our status or our wealth, but our character and the love we show to others, especially our children. It's about fighting for what is right with dignity and integrity. What did you think of Alex's strategy? Do you believe he did the right thing by playing that voicemail, or should he have taken a different approach? I would love to read your thoughts in the comments section below. Your perspectives add so much to this community. And if this story resonated with you, please don't forget to give it a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel for more stories of justice, vindication, and the enduring strength of the human spirit. Thank you for being here, and we'll see you in the next one.